Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to be sharing 3 common misconceptions in the French. And these misconceptions can range from levels from beginners to experts, so anyone that is watching the video could learn something from it. And my previous video I did was on the misconception variation of the French, and I will mention it again in this video, and feel free to check out that video, and its link will be at the end of the video description, so you can check that out as well. But firstly, here I'm going to be sharing 3 very common misconceptions these days and how you might be able to fix them as white or as black. The first one is a very common piece gambit that arises straight down from the main Steinitz variation. It starts off when white plays e4, e6, d4, d5. The traditional French defense variation, and here knight c3 is played. Now, for all these lines, I won't be sharing a line with knight d2 the Tarash, because knight c3 is where most of the dynamic play comes in. The Tarash is considerably more solid and offers less winning chances for white than knight c3 does. But anyway, after knight f6, e5, knight fd7, f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop e3, and here there are many moves for black. There's the move a6, bishop e7, but the gambit that arises is when black plays the move queen b6. Now, white's best way to play against queen b6 is knight a4. And after queen a5, c3, and c takes c4, here white counter pushes with the move b4, which attacks the queen and threatens to take this pawn. And here, black usually plays knight takes b4 in this position, and after c takes, bishop d2, bishop takes d2, knight takes d2. This line is the gambit line where black sacrifices a piece but has 3 pawns for it. And this pawn will prove to be very strong if white does not know how to play correctly. And in fact, a lot of players are recommended to play this as black, saying that black is slightly better if white does not play correctly. However, that is simply not the case. If white plays correctly, white will consolidate with his piece and will get a better position. In fact, in this position, here black almost always plays b6, and white's main goal is to protect the d3 square with everything that he has. Once this pawn hits the d3 solidly, then f6 will come breaking open the center, this e pawn will come e5, e4, and black's center pawns will become very strong. But for now, this is what white should be doing. White should blockade that square. And after the move bishop a6, and this is the move that most players don't know. Most players at this position, they just take the bishop on a6. And after queen takes a6, something like knight f3 attacking the pawn is easily met by the move knight c5, attacking the knight on the edge. Once knight is taken, the pawn from the b file takes, solidifying the pawn on d4. And after something like rook c1 is played, then rook c8 protects this pawn. After queen d2, black can play something like d3. Notice that black has occupied the safe d3 square. And after white castles, black can play the move c4. And look at that gigantic pawn chain. And here black is just better. There's no doubt about it. Black has all these central pawns in the center from f7 to d3. And all of black's pawns are extremely solid. And this a2 pawn will prove to be weak. The c3 and d4 pawns look extremely menacing. And this is obviously what black players want to achieve. However, after bishop a6, the more common move bishop takes a6, which is still okay for white, is not the best. And the best that most players don't know is the move knight b2. Now, most players that are on a higher level, they know about this knight b2 move. But they also say that it's worse than bishop takes a6 because of the move knight c5. But after the move knight c5, which attacks the bishop on d3 twice, now you take. And the main difference now is after queen takes, you have the chance of playing the move queen e2 as white. And this matters hugely. Why? Because trading queens will be amazing for it. If here black just decides to take on e2, king takes e2, and here white can just be considered winning. The d4 pawn's going to drop, and here white's just going to be up an extra piece sooner or later. So after knight to 5, bishop takes, queen takes. The main reason why queen e2 didn't work in this position is after if you play queen e2 here, knight just lost. That's a free knight for black, and now black's 3 pawns up. But after queen takes a6 here, now you can play queen e2. And in this position, there are multiple ways for black to play, but the most tenacious ones are queen a3 and d3. I'm going to be covering d3 first, but in this case, because there's no b takes c5 and there's no c pawn for black, the d pawn is a lot less dangerous. And here's another very common strategy. After queen e3, which keeps the eye on this pawn, notice how the knight on c5 needs to protect this pawn to make sure that it's safe, because there are 2 defenders and there are 2 attackers. However, this knight also blocks off the c file for black. That square right there is blocked off. So when the rooks come in, they can't move the knight because then this pawn drops, which means that the c file is inaccessible by black. So in this position, after queen a3 attacks the knight, extremely common idea. Here, white just plays rook b1, and after, if you take on a2, then the pawn on d3 falls, and here white's obviously better. And if you play castles, then simply white just castles, and sooner or later white's going to be able to bring a rook to attack this pawn, such as playing rook f3. Well, not now, but maybe later. And as you can see, after something like rook fc8, here you can play g4 already. You can start attacking these pawns. And look how this knight on c5, it literally can't move. There's no way you can move it that will help black's position, because then the d3 pawn will fall. So that's d3, and after you play queen e3 and you solidify your grip on the d3 pawn, it's not a problem. However, the much harder move to play against in this position is the move queen a3. And the main reason is, if you don't know what you're doing, then you'll be completely toasted again, and black's gonna get this amazing pawn, bring rooks across to the c file, and you're gonna be screwed. For example, if you play a rook b1, and after something like rook c8, then queen b5 check. And if you play something like knight d7, then castles, well, you can't castle, right? Yeah, actually you can castle. And after check takes, rook f2, rook c2, etc, etc. In this position, white's slightly better. I didn't play the best move for black, but white's slightly better here. So rook b1 is the safe way to go, and that's what I would recommend. But a lot of people, after the move queen a3, they like playing queen b5 check. And here black actually has a few tricks up his sleeve, which is why I recommend to play rook b1. Queen e5 is objectively better for white, but here black plays the move king e7. And after you play castles, which is obviously the best move, here rook hc8 is played. And now you have to be very careful as white, because now you need to play a few precise moves. However, if you play this move, like I usually do, like I would prefer you to play rook b1, but if you know this move, then you're going to be safe in this position as well. So take your time, and maybe you might also find this move as well for yourself. Alright, if you found the move, congratulations. The move that allows white to get a very big advantage right on the spot is the move rook f3. And this move, if you don't know about it, don't try to play this line. It's not good for white. However, if you know about rook f3, you're going to be safe, because now the queen is technically trapped. It has to exchange itself. And after queen takes a5, here after b takes a5, and after knight d3, now all of a sudden white's completely fine here, because now the queens are exchanged off, and black's 3 pawns are suddenly like 1 pawn, because black has all these double pawns, and white's just better here. So against queen a3, I would play queen b5 check, but if you're not that good at memorizing stuff, I recommend you play rook b1 instead. They're both fine lines. However, other than rook b1 and queen b5, there are no other good moves, so you can pick and choose. Alright, so finally, this is the main reason why knight b2, and after knight comes to c5, the bishop can take. If knight doesn't come to c5, and let's say that black takes immediately, and then plays knight a5 himself, another important thing is never ever take a knight on c5. If you take this knight, then suddenly b takes c5 is played, and now black gets this equally good pawn structure after c4 and d3. Instead, in this position, play knight f2. Now the knight's on a safe square, attacking d3. If you can play d3, then we're in the same knight c5 situation. One attacker, one defender. So here, white castles, and if black decides to play something like queen a6, then you can play knight b3. Now this threatens the knight and threatens the pawn. And after something like rook c8, you can just take the knight, and after b takes, you can take the other pawn, and you're going to be a piece for 2 pawns in a better position. So that's why this line, which is said to be good for black if you don't know what to do, instead of playing knight b2, if you take on a6 instead, black is better. But other than that, if you play the move knight b2 and you follow all the instructions of taking care on d3, you should know that white is better. So that's the first French misconception. A lot of coaches may have taught you that this line is extremely good. And if you're a beginner level, then this line is very good for black. However, at higher levels, maybe like 1500, 1600 FIDE rating, this line starts to become futile and starts to deteriorate. So here is the second misconception. So this next misconception is a very common one too. And here it starts off as e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, and here black has a few lines to play, but we're still going to focus on knight f6. And the second misconception is a lot of players think that the Steinitz variation is a better line than the main line. Now, that is a lot of arguments. So just in case you don't know the background, the Steinitz variation is after e5, knight fd7, f4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. That was the line that we covered before, which was the main line of the Steinitz. However, the main line is bishop g5. Now, a lot of people say that this is worse than the Steinitz, because after bishop e7, e5, knight fd7, this is the main line of the main line. Then bishop takes c7, queen takes c7, and now f4, followed by e6, knight f3, c5, and etc., etc. This line is considered for most people to be worse than white than traditional Steinitz. The traditional Steinitz variation. Wait, no, wrong sector. Right. So let's just replay this actually. Knight f3, e5, knight d7. f4, c5. And here, after c5, the move in this position, this is the Steinitz, and this is the main line. They look quite similar, except for one key difference. White does not have his dark square bishop, black does not have his. Now, is that good or bad for white? If it's good for white, which is what it's supposed to be, it means that without the dark square bishops, white should be better, and white should try to exchange the dark squared bishops. However, on the other side, people say that the main line is worse because in the French defense, black has less space, and exchanging a pair of pieces gives black the same amount of space that he needs. And although that is an extremely common misconception, that is just wrong. And the wrong part is not the misconception that without the dark squared bishops, if black is better, not white. The misconception is that in the French defense, black does not run out of space. Black has more than enough space because he's always going to be able to play b5 and b4, and there's nothing you can do about it. Unless you play move a4 here, which is just wasting way too much tempi. And the main reason is that after in the Steinitz, as I said before, after knight f3, knight f6, bishop e3, the move queen b6 is what gets into the main line and why the piece sacrifice is not a good idea for black. However, here, black is just playing the move bishop b7. And after white plays queen d2, a6, bishop e2, here black plays b5. And after a3, bishop b7, castles, castles. In this line, now black doesn't have a single space cramp. Black, all of his pieces are harmoniously placed, and black's pieces are doing completely fine. And although white's definitely not cramped, black's not cramped either. He has more than enough space to continue playing this game. So that is the second misconception, that the main line is worse than the Steinitz variation, which arises like this. And after bishop g5, the main line is worse because the dark square bishops are exchanged like this. That is simply not true. The main line is 100% better for white than the actual Steinitz. Why? Because the dark square bishop is the most important minor piece in black's position. Notice how all these pawns are light squares. And most of black's pawns will be on light squares after moves like g6 and, well, not c6, but a6. So, moving back, that is the second misconception. However, if you were to play against this position, which you will find in 99% of your game, well, not 99, 80% of your games if you play knight c3 because of the large amount of winner players, you find this position a lot likely to be played on. However, instead, if you play e5, then after knight of d7, f4, playing the Steinitz, this is what I would recommend, because if you play the main line, I'm not afraid of your opponents playing the move bishop e7. I'm afraid of your opponents playing bishop e4, the McCutcheon variation. As I mentioned in the last video, this could be a big problem for white. And see, if I flip the board and then you go to the video, my previous video, you'll see that this line is extremely good for black. And which is why I won't recommend you playing the main line if your opponent knows about bishop b4. And finally, here we're at our third and last misconception, which isn't really a misconception, it's more of a trap. And here, it's a line about the winner war. And here, the misconception is that white can get an advantage by playing queen g4 early. Now this is very beginner stuff. And the main reason is that here, if you know what black is supposed to do, black is supposed to play the move knight f6. And after queen takes g7, rook g8, queen h6, bishop c3, bc3, and knight takes c4, queen takes h7, and rook f8. This line is supposed to be very good for white. And now, although, because white's up a pawn, a lot of beginners say that this is very good for black, but it is technically very good for white unless you play the very bad move bishop d2. And if you don't know why, the move bishop d2 protects c3, and a lot of beginners play this, but this is just a very bad move because of the trap that's about to happen. So feel free to pause the video and maybe you can find the trap yourself. Alright, if you found it, congratulations. Black wins on the spot with the move queen f6. This is a double attack. Pawn f2 is under attack, and if you play the move f3, the move rook h8 traps the queen. And in this position, black is winning. And this trap, if you're on a high level, and that means you won't miss this trap, and which means that you can go for this line as white, because then you won't be playing the bad move of bishop d2 in this position. And other than that, you should be in a pretty good spot to play. So those are our 3 big misconceptions. However, because I've been making this video and I've missed a lot of the viewers, I've decided to add a special bonus puzzle here. So this was from one of my games. And it was a very quick game. It was when I was still 2300 rating. I played this very recently, 2300 chess.com rating, because I'm not really good at blitz. But when we are studying these types of games, a big misconception is that playing the move f5 when the pawns are on e6 and d5 is a good idea. It makes a stone wall structure that's supposed to be better for white. However, in this case, I played a very fast opening trap, which won the game very, very quickly. So I'll take you through this. So after e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4. So this was also a winner war. I played the line I play against the winner war, the orthodox or Alexian Maroczy gambit, because it gambits the pawn on e4, but most players nowadays don't take it. After e5, knight e4, a6, bishop takes, knight takes. Here my opponents in this position played f5. Now, f5 is a very, very bad move in the opening, and it should never ever be played, even when it's in the middle game and you want to play f6 and not f5. This stone structure does have its big weaknesses, because with the pawn on e5 for white, Now black really gets cramped because there's no way for black to get rid of white's center. This means that in this position, now the pawn on f5 becomes a very big liability, and this early in the game, it becomes a very big problem. Now, queen h5 check is the best move here, but I played the more intuitive e takes f6. And here, black should have taken back with his knight, but then black would have a backward e-pawn, and I would obviously be better. However, he played the move knight takes c3, which misses the move f takes g7, because now the knight attacks the queen, but the pawn attacks the rook, which threatens the queen. And after the move rook g8, here I played the move queen h5 check. If king e7 is played, bishop g5 picks up the queen immediately. So here, king d7 has to be played. And now I play the move queen f7 check, which protects this pawn now. So now the king comes to c6. And here I take this pawn, and knight. And here, black, I'm completely winning, and black's very underdeveloped. And here, my opponent probably made a mouse slip. He wanted to play bishop d7 probably, but he played knight d7, which allowed me to finish off the game with a mate and 1. So this game was a checkmate in only 13 moves, but it shows how playing f5 so early on in the game, or any time in the game, would be a very bad idea. So there you have it. 3 misconceptions in the French, from here and here. 3 misconceptions in the French, followed by a small bonus game. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you really enjoyed it, or if you had some other questions about it, then you can like, comment, share, or subscribe to my channel, because I will be probably becoming less and less active as school is starting, so I would appreciate some more support. And I will also have a donation link in the description, so if you really enjoyed the video, you can also donate if you want. So I hope that you enjoyed the video in general, I hope that you learned something, and I'll see you in my next video. Have a great day.